Okay, so in class yesterday, we were able to begin discussing the real world problem about the context involved in transformations. So we were looking at this problem. This is our real world application, and you probably already have a lot of this information down on your paper. But what I didn't do with you guys was actually make a list of what the meanings of each of these things is. And I think when you're doing your homework tonight, this will be really helpful. So let's go ahead and take a look at the notes you've got, and let's add things that I'm about to write down that maybe you haven't written down. We talked about it in class, but I want to make sure you get it down on paper, okay? So in this problem, we have a publishing company that's selling books to a large retailer for $8.25 a book. And it's telling us that the daily cost of the company to print X books is C of X is $825X plus $1,500. And we did talk about that a little bit, but I want to break this down a little bit. So the main things that I see, and I know we talked about in class, is we are printing X number of books, right? X number of books. So we talked about that X is not just the books, but the number of books. And the fact that it's the number is important. So number of books. Okay. Again, sorry about my rough handwriting over here. Okay. So X is the number of books. We know we have the daily cost here. The daily cost is the C of X that we've got right over here. This daily cost is this entire equation, C of X. This whole equation will give us the daily cost. So I'm going to write up here in my list, C of X. This is the daily cost to run my company. So it's $8.25 per book that I print, and also that $1,500 extra. And we talked about that in class. We tried to figure out where that $1,500 extra comes from. And we decided this $1,500 extra, this is the cost of running my company, whether or not I'm printing books. So this $1,500 could be things like rent that I have to pay on the building that I've got. It could be like the electric just to turn it on. It could be the cost of running my printing machine. Just turning them on consumes a whole bunch of power. It could be paying my employees, right? So even if I'm not making any books, I still have to pay $1,500 every single day. So we're going to call this our initial cost. So initial cost means cost before I make any books, okay? So the $1,500 is that initial cost, and it could be, again, rent or energy or something like that that costs me money no matter what. So we broke down some of these operations here. Let's go ahead and take another look at these. So I have C of X minus K, all right? C of X minus K. And in this case, the K is inside my parentheses with the letter X. And again, X means the number of books. So this K only affects the number of books. It's being subtracted from them. So this affects the number of books in this problem. And it only affects the number of books in this problem. It doesn't have anything to do with the total cost at the end. It has to do with what we're plugging into our equation. So it's changing that number of books somehow. So we have lots of different ways that this could affect us, and we're going to take another closer look at that in the next slide. So the next one down here, C of X plus K, that's taking our C of X, that number that we already have, and adding to the end of it, right? It's adding a number to the very end. If we take a look at our equation C of X, we already have a number being added to the very end. We have the cost to print each book, and we have that big number that's being added at the end. If we add another number to this equation, it's going to combine with that number that was already there. And it's either going to increase it, or if it's negative, it's going to decrease it, and it's going to change that 1,500 in some way. So what that means is that if we have this plus k at the end of this particular equation, this will affect, so this affects, what did we call that? We called that the initial cost. So this has nothing to do with the number of books that we're printing. The number of books is separate. C of x, the x input has nothing to do with the 1,500 at the end. Even if I print no books, that 1,500 is still there. So this is affecting the initial cost, and it has nothing to do with the number of books that we print, okay? All right. So let's take a look at the last one. We have that k up front, and it's multiplying the entire c of x inside, right? And we have already looked at what c of x means. C of x means the daily cost, right? So it's right up here. C of x is the daily cost. So if I take the daily cost to run my company and multiply it by a number bigger than 1, it is going to get much larger. If I take the daily cost of running my company and multiply it by a fraction, maybe I got something on sale, I don't know, but if I multiply it by a fraction, something smaller than 1, it's going to get smaller. So this is affecting my entire daily cost, the whole thing. So this affects my entire daily cost. Okay. So we can see if it's in the parentheses, it's only affecting x, only affecting the number of books. If it's being added to the end, if there's anything else being added to the end, that's what it's going to affect. So we've got that initial cost, it's going to affect that initial cost. And if it's in the beginning multiplied by the entire thing, that means it affects the entire thing, okay? So let's take a look at some specific examples, and will help you break down your homework problems, okay? So let's take a look at c of x minus k. We have our equation, c of x. We have that 825x plus 1,500, and we want to apply the transformation c of x minus k. And I think we got to this spot in most of the classes, but just in case you didn't catch this bit, in order to see c of x minus k, we want to take the x inside our equation and replace it with the x minus k that we need to do our transformation. So we're going to have c of x minus k, and that's going to equal our 825, and instead of being multiplied by x, it's going to be multiplied by x minus k, right? And then we can add the 1,500 for the initial cost. Okay, so we did the application. Now we want to look at some actual numbers. K is a number. K is going to be 100. We have to figure out what k is before we can actually solve anything with this problem, because if we don't put k in, we have too many things that are unknown to actually find any answers. So now that we know k is 100, the first thing we can do to solve this problem, or to get closer to understanding the context, is to go ahead and plug in k. So c of x minus 100, we know what k is now, and that's going to be 825 times x minus 100 plus 1,500. So we know that x stands for the number of books. We just looked at that in the last slide. X means the number of books. And if we have that minus k in with x, it means it's going to affect the number of books in some way, the number of books that are costing me money. So normally, it costs me $8.25 per book, right? But in this case, I'm subtracting from the number of books that I am spending money on, okay? So if we take a look at what this means in context, if I, for example, make 200 books, if that's what I'm printing today, I'm going to have C of x minus 100, so I'm going to have C of the 200 books I'm printing minus the 100 books that I am subtracting because of k, right? So when I put that into my equation, let's go ahead and simplify this. This 200 minus 100, that gives me just 100 books that I'm actually plugging into my equation, even though I'm printing 200. So the cost to print 200 books is going to be $8.25 times only 100 plus the 1,500 to run my company. So I'm actually making 200 books, but I am not paying for 100 of them. That is what this minus 100 did. It said 100 of the books that you're printing, for some reason, I don't know what reason it is, but they're not going to cost you anything. So we're going to go ahead and subtract those out from the total cost of your company. All right. If X was just 100, if we decided that all we were printing was 100 books, we would have C of 100 books that we're printing minus the 100 that K was. And that number, 100 minus 100, that gives us the number 0. So this is actually 825 times 0 plus our initial 1,500. And that's awesome because 825 times 0 is just 0. And it's actually not costing me anything to print the first 100 books. So if we're subtracting K from the number of books we need to print, that's very good news for our company. That means it's saving me money, okay? So in context, it means that what's happening here is this is reducing the number of books that will cost me money by 100. So this reduces, we want to put it in context. We want to use the words from the problem. So this reduces the number of books. Remember that X was the number of books. Number of books that cost me money. And specifically, it reduces it by 100. So it effectively means the first 100 books are going to be free, essentially, okay? Sorry about that. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at another transformation. Got this one right here. In this one, we want to do C of X plus K, where K is outside of the X, okay? We already looked at this transformation. This means that we're taking our C of X, this whole equation over here. We're taking this whole equation, and then we're adding a number to it, right? And in this case, they gave us the number. They said, okay, K is 250. Perfect. So what I need to do to add 250 to this equation is I need to take my C of K and I need to add 250. They just told me what that K is. It's that 250. So I need to take my C of K and add 250. So I know what my C of K is as an equation. It's $8.25 times X plus 1,500. And if I'm going to add K to that, I'm going to go ahead and just add K, which is 250. So see, I've added it to the left and I've added it to the right. So we can simplify this a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and write it down here, even though we're not at the context bit yet. So we have C of K plus 250, and that's going to give us $8.25 times X, plus we can actually combine these two numbers. 1,500 plus 250 is 1,750. So we've got our new equation, and what we can see happened, and this is what we were talking about 2 slides ago. In fact, let's go ahead and have a peek at that. We said that if we were adding it to the end of our function right here, it is going to affect the initial cost. So plus K is going to take the number we were already adding to the end of our function and change it. So our initial cost was 1,500. Now all of a sudden it's 1,750. So this increased our total cost. Sorry about that. This increased our total cost and it increased it from 1,500, right? Oh, I'm very sorry. I said total cost. This isn't what we call the total cost. The 1,500 is the initial cost. That's my bad. So we were talking about how that 1,500 is the initial cost, what it costs just to run the company without printing any books, right? Before printing any books, it costs us 1,500. So this increased our initial cost to run the company from 1,500 to 1,750, and these are dollars, right? So it used to cost $1,500, now it's costing $1,750, okay? So we talked about, in some of the classes, we talked about some of the reasons that might change. So if it normally costs us $1,500 to run our company because we have to pay our employees and all sorts of other crazy stuff, the reason our cost may have increased could be that maybe we bought a second printing press, or possibly we hired a bunch of new employees, or maybe they just started charging us more for rent or something crazy like that. But for some reason, our base cost has increased by $250, okay? We've got just one more example. And again, your homework problems are similar to this situation. So hopefully this will help you solve that. In this one, we have k times c of x. And k times c of x means that we're taking c of x, which we know is the total, absolute, entire cost to run our company, including books and the initial cost, and we're multiplying it by k. And in this case, our k is the number 1/2. So if we have to take the number 1/2 and multiply it by c of x, all right, so c of x is being multiplied by 1/2. That means that we're also going to have to take the number 1/2 and multiply it by the equation that c of x is equal to, which is that $8.25 times x plus 1,500. So we're going to take that entire equation and multiply it by that 1/2, okay? Now, there's nothing I can really do to make this look nicer. I can't simplify that at all, not easily anyway. So we're going to go ahead and just jump straight to what that means. So if I take the cost of running my company and multiply it by 1/2, that really just means that this k out front is going to cut the total cost to run my company in half, right? That's all it really does. So this cuts the total cost to run my company in half, okay? So whatever it was costing me based on the books and based on my initial cost, all of a sudden, now I only have to pay half of that. And if we're talking about a reason why that could happen, perhaps all of a sudden I decided that I was going to run this company with a partner. So I said, okay, we're going to take the total cost of running the company. I'll pay half and you pay half. So if I'm just trying to calculate how much I have to pay, I'll take my total cost and I will cut it in half, okay? So there's lots of reasons why we might have to do things like this, but if you're going to work on your homework problems, here is my advice to you. And actually, I built this into the homework to try to make it easier for you. First, let's go back a few slides. First, take a look at your homework problem and find all of this important information, the stuff underlined in yellow. That's going to be the most pivotal stuff. But don't only write down the important information, do what we did up here, where we took this important information and we broke down exactly what each and everything means. And that's what I did for you in the homework problem. So I said, okay, we have the variable p inside this problem. Great. What does it stand for? We have f of p. What does f of p mean? In this problem, x was the number of books and c of x was the daily cost of running the company. In your homework problems, they're going to be different, okay? And then I identified important other numbers in the problem that could affect the context, and I asked you to identify what those mean as well. And you don't have to write a sentence for that. You just have to write the words that are critical to the meaning there. So 1,500 is the initial cost. C of x is the daily cost, okay? And then for the second part, where it's actually asking you to look at the transformations, that's where I want you to come back here to these other problems we did together, see what those transformations are, what variable they're affecting that you've already labeled, and then try to explain in a sentence how it's affecting that variable. So we know that this is our number of books, so this is reducing the number of books. We know that c of x plus that 1,500 is the initial cost, so we know that we're increasing the initial cost. And over here, we know that c of x is our entire daily cost, and we're cutting it in half. So we're cutting the total cost in half, okay? So try those homework problems. Please contact me if you have any questions about them. And remember, they are due on Friday, okay? Good luck.